A man stands at a graveside. His wife of 41 years is in the ground in front of him. His face does not move. Not a twitch, not a tremor. The people around him whisper about how strong he is. He is not strong. He is following a rule. The rule was written before he was born, before his father was born. The rule says men do not cry. The rule has been so loud for so long that he has forgotten the rule exists. He thinks the stillness is him. It isn't. 2,000 years ago, men cried constantly. 500 years ago, men cried constantly. 200 years ago, the rule started to harden. Then something broke. Not in him, in the species. The rule is recent. The rule is not universal. The rule is not natural. And the rule has cost more lives than almost anyone has stopped to count. Achilles is the most lethal warrior in the most famous war poem ever written, the Iliad, around 800 BC. Faster, stronger, deadlier than every other man on the field. Homer wrote him as the closest thing to a god a human could be. Achilles weeps, constantly. When his friend Patroclus dies, Achilles falls into the dirt. He grabs handfuls of ash and rubs them into his hair and his face. He howls so loudly that his mother, a sea goddess, hears him from the bottom of the ocean and rises to find out what's wrong. That's a scene from the founding document of Western literature. The strongest man in the story is sobbing in the dirt. Nobody finds this strange. Nobody hands him a tissue. Nobody mentions it again. He's crying. That's what people did. From the Gospels to medieval Europe, the pattern holds. Christ weeps openly in the New Testament. The shortest verse in the Bible is 2 words. Jesus wept. Cardinal Wolsey, the second most powerful man in Henry VIII's England, sobbed in public after his fall from court. Nobody looked away. Nobody told him to handle himself like a man, because that wasn't yet the rule. Now skip ahead 2.5 centuries, 1842. Charles Dickens, the most famous living writer in the English-speaking world, comes back from a tour in America. His friend John Forster meets him at the carriage. Forster bursts into tears and climbs in sobbing. 2 adult men, famous men, crying in public in front of a crowd at the sight of each other. 3 years later, Dickens writes a Christmas story called The Chimes. He invites his friends to a private reading. He reads it aloud. The men in the room weep openly. One observer sketched the scene. Several of the men in his drawing have tears streaming down their faces. Dickens was thrilled, not because he made them cry, because they cried at the right moment. The crying was the proof he'd written something real. This is the historian Tom Lias's argument in his book Crying: A Natural and Cultural History of Tears. For most of recorded history, in most of the world, men cried. They cried at funerals, at weddings, at political defeats, at moments of beauty. They cried in front of other men who did not look away because the other men cried too. So what happened? Before we get there, you need to know something about tears, because they are stranger than you think. Most animals do not cry. Not the way you do. They have tear ducts. Cats, dogs, elephants, dolphins, the ducts exist. They lubricate the eye, they wash out dust, they have nothing to do with emotion. Only humans cry from feeling. The species is, biologically, an outlier. Charles Darwin himself called it a special expression of man. Nobody has ever convincingly explained why we developed this when no other species did. We are the lone weeping species on a planet of dry-eyed animals. There are 3 kinds of tears. Basal tears, which keep your eye wet, reflex tears when you cut an onion, and emotional tears when something hurts inside instead of outside. They look identical leaving your face. They are not identical inside. In the 1980s, biochemist William Frey at the St. Paul Ramsey Medical Center in Minnesota collected emotional tears and reflex tears from volunteers. Sad movies for one set, sliced onions for the other. He ran the chemistry. Emotional tears were different, 24% more protein. Among those proteins, prolactin, a stress hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, another stress hormone, and leucine and enkephalin, a natural painkiller your body produces when it's hurting. Your body wasn't just leaking salt water, it was excreting the chemicals of pain. Frey's core finding has been debated, refined, argued over for 40 years. The mechanism is still being studied, but the central observation has held up. Researchers like Ad Vingerhoutz at Tilburg University have continued this work into the 2020s, confirming that emotional crying produces measurable physiological changes reflex tears do not. We are, every one of us, walking around with a built-in pressure release valve. And for the last few hundred years, we've been teaching half the species to weld it shut. That's the science. Now the welding. The shift was not a single event. It was a slow tightening across 400 years. And once you see how it happened, you cannot unsee it. The same machine that built modern wealth built the silence at the graveside. It started with philosophy. In the 1500s and 1600s, European thinkers rediscovered Stoicism, Greek and Roman writings about emotional self-mastery. Suddenly, restraint was the mark of nobility. A treatise from 1586 called A Treatise of Melancholy labeled excessive weeping a female trait. The first crack in the wall, but the wall was mostly missing. Wolsey still wept. 2 centuries later, Dickens still wept. The reading still happened. Then came factories. Between roughly 1780 and 1850, a kind of work was invented that had never existed before. Industrial labor. 12-hour shifts inside disciplined buildings. Men by the thousands separated from their families and from each other by the noise of machines. A man crying on the factory floor was not productive. A man crying on the factory floor was a problem. A man crying anywhere became slowly a kind of failure. The factory needed a new kind of man, quiet, steady, reliable. A man whose internal weather did not interfere with his external output. The economy needed him not to cry, so the culture stopped letting him. In 1857, a British writer named T.C. Sanders coined a phrase in a book review, Muscular Christianity. It exploded across Victorian England. The ideal Christian man, the writers said, was tough, stoic, restrained, disciplined, the opposite of soft, the opposite of weeping. Boys' schools picked it up. Military academies picked it up, sermons picked it up, the British Empire picked it up and exported it on ships to every continent it occupied. The rule traveled on the same currents as the cotton and the tea. Stiff upper lip enters the English language during this period. It does not mean don't show fear. It means very specifically, do not let your face move. This was not a slow cultural drift. This was an engineering project. Schools, military, churches, factories, all retraining the same nervous system at the same time. Within 4 generations, the change was nearly complete. Half the species trained to stop using a body part that had been used for 200,000 years. The boys raised under this rule became the fathers of the next generation. Those fathers raised their sons in the same rule. Those sons raised the men your grandfather was. Your grandfather raised your father. Your father, however he was raised inside the rule. You are inside it now, even if you're a woman. The rule was for men, but a culture that teaches half its people that weeping is shameful does not contain that shame neatly. It seeps out. It teaches everyone to apologize for tears. The rule is everywhere. The rule is so loud you cannot hear it anymore. The rule is the silence at the graveside. The obvious objection here is that maybe the old crying wasn't real. Maybe Achilles was a literary convention. Maybe Dickens was unusual. Maybe historical men were performing tears the way later men would perform stoicism. It's a fair objection. The answer is in private letters. Samuel Pepys, in his diary, records himself weeping at a sermon in 1660, not in performance, in a private journal nobody was meant to read for 200 years. James Boswell, in his journals, describes himself sobbing in his rooms in the 1760s. American Civil War soldiers wrote home about weeping in the trenches the way you'd mention being cold as description, not confession. Then, 1 generation later, the letters change. World War I soldiers don't mention crying, not because they didn't, because by then you weren't supposed to write it down. The shift wasn't in what men did. The shift was in what men were allowed to admit. The crying was real. The suppression is what's new. So what has the rule cost? This is where the story gets heavy. If you need to take a breath, take it now. In every industrialized country where the data is tracked carefully, men die by suicide at dramatically higher rates than women. In the United States, the ratio is roughly 4-to-1. Globally, in 2021, around 519,000 men died by suicide compared to 227,000 women. Researchers have given this a name. They call it the silent epidemic. The reasons are not single. Method choice matters. Access to firearms matters. Substance abuse matters. There is no one variable. But across the studies, one variable keeps appearing: help-seeking behavior. The willingness to say out loud to another human that you are not okay. Men, on average, in industrialized societies, do not say it. They go to doctors at lower rates for everything, mental health included. They sit with the chemistry of pain inside their bodies. They do not let it out. And the chemistry that was supposed to leave through tears stays. It stays for years, for decades, for lifetimes. Science cannot prove the causal chain end to end. But the cross-cultural correlation is strong enough that researchers in the field discuss it openly. The cultures with the most rigid emotional suppression norms for men have the highest male suicide rates. The cultures that permit male emotional expression have lower rates. 400 years ago, a cardinal wept openly at his fall from grace, and his contemporaries did not consider it strange. Today, the descendants of his culture die by their own hands at a rate that has been called an epidemic. This is not an accident. This is the bill arriving for a rule we did not know we were following. Some of you watching this are not strangers to that bill. Some of you are watching this at 2 in the morning because the world is quiet enough now to think. Some of you have not cried in years. Some of you have spent your whole life looking strong at the graveside while something inside you has been screaming. We are not telling you to cry on demand. Nobody can do that. The point is that the inability is not a feature of you, it is a feature of the rule. The rule is not who you are. The rule is what was done to the version of you that was a small boy nobody let weep. That boy did not deserve the rule. Neither do you. Now here is the part that nobody saw coming. The rule is breaking. For the first time in 400 years, the trend is reversing. Public male crying, in the cultures where it was most strictly forbidden, is becoming acceptable again. Not encouraged yet, but not punished. Watch sports. Athletes weeping openly at retirements, at championships, at losses. In 2022, Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal sat side by side at Federer's career-ending match and sobbed in front of millions of cameras. Two men who had spent 20 years trying to defeat each other crying together while the crowd cheered. Nobody mocked them. The clips went viral as celebrations. Watch funerals, watch political speeches. The men who cry now are not punished. Sometimes they are admired for it. The rule is not gone. The rule is fading. Cohorts of younger men, in studies on emotional expression, show different patterns from their fathers. They cry more readily. They report it without shame. They talk to friends about feelings in ways their grandfathers would have found unthinkable. This is what evolution does. Given enough time, it returns to what it was. 200,000 years of human crying versus a few hundred years of forced suppression. The 200,000 wins, eventually. The Victorian experiment in welding the valve shut is ending. Not all at once, not everywhere, but ending. Look at the man at the graveside, the one from the start of this video. He is not stronger than the cardinal who wept at his fall. He is not stronger than Achilles in the dirt. He is not stronger than your grandfather, who never cried in front of you. He is following a rule written by people who needed factory labor and built a culture around it. A rule that has had its turn. A rule that is losing its grip. He didn't choose it. The rule was given to him before he had a vocabulary to refuse it. Neither did you. You are running software that was installed before you knew it was being installed. The software said, hold still. The software said, don't let it show. The software was written for a factory floor that doesn't even exist anymore. You are allowed to update the software. The body has been carrying the chemistry of suppressed feeling for as long as you've been alive. The body is patient. The body will wait. But the body eventually asks for what it was built to do. The next time you feel it coming, you have something the man at the graveside doesn't have. You know the rule is not the truth. That's the beginning of the end of the rule. You,